Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for What Culture Wrestling, and guess what? Hell is frozen over. Again. Vince McMahon has only gone and employed two of his biggest career rivals ever, Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff, to effectively run Raw and SmackDown respectively as creative directors. They've been given levels of power described as being comparable to Triple H's down in NXT. And while Vince McMahon is still the chairman and he isn't going anywhere anytime soon, he'll still have the final say on things, but at the same time, does sound like Bischoff and Heyman will have a good degree of creative freedom going forward as they try and reshape Raw and SmackDown with ratings absolutely cratering. It's yet another mad mental wrestling story in a year full of them. Even yesterday morning, the idea that Vince McMahon would turn to two of his biggest rivals ever in order to try and steady the ship would have been unthinkable. But it had happened by the afternoon, the big lads are in place, and well, here we bloody go. So what does this mean for WWE in the short term, and what will the knock-on effects be now that Hogan and Bischoff are in office? Well, let's have a look. I'm Andy for What Culture Wrestling, and here are 8 ways that Bischoff and Heyman will impact WWE TV. Number 8, renewed hardcore fan interest. First things first, when you're talking about modern day WWE television, you are messing with the worst, and in bringing in a couple of old dirty Bischoffs to steady the ship, WWE are ensuring that old heads are going to be turned, and if you got the Wu-Tang reference, you're great. Heyman and Bischoff are names that mean something to an older generation, many of which have lost their way when it comes to modern WWE. Now this might be a short-term fix, but in bringing these names in and assuring the public that they will have a degree of power, it might just convince those old viewers who loved ECW, who loved WCW and everything that went down during the Monday Night Raws, that maybe their preferred style of wrestling is on the way back. Of course, if you can recall Heyman's stint with ECW and of course his time booking SmackDown, you know very well what the man can do. He's one of the sharpest creative minds in wrestling history. And while Bischoff has his rightful detractors, particularly for the way WCW ended, he had his successes as well. Let's not forget that at one point, that company was in a far more dire strait than WWE is today. The guy knows what he's doing, so let's see if he can pull it off. Number 7, a clear difference between Raw and SmackDown. Over the years, WWE have regularly struggled to give Raw and SmackDown their own unique feel and identity, and now they've pretty much given up on that entirely. I hate the wildcard rule. But with Bischoff and Heyman working their respective brands independently, there's now a chance that this new management structure could finally give Raw and SmackDown the own unique feel that both of them have been crying out for. Under Heyman, much like ECW back in the day, there's every chance that Raw could become a breeding ground for young talent, and on SmackDown, well, Bischoff is known for delivering the kind of soap opera drama that WWE absolutely love, so maybe we'll see that come to fruition as well. Now that's just my speculation of course, but let's be honest, both shows definitely need freshening up. Everything just feels so stale at the moment, even when Raw and SmackDown are good. And speaking of the blue brand, there are still times, unfortunately, that it just kind of feels like a Raw recap show. Stop with the replays, please. But how should Bischoff and Heyman go about forging these new identities for their new shows? Well, here's an idea. Number 6, the death of the wildcard rule. So here's the thing about the wildcard rule. It absolutely sucks. Those early cynical predictions have been proven correct, with the wildcard rule benefiting only those at the absolute top of the card. Now, if you're a shining star like Roman Reigns or Shane McMahon, you're all very well, you're on TV all the goddamn time, 30 minutes on Raw, 40 minutes on SmackDown, no problem. But what about the undermined mid-card? Lesser promoted wrestlers now have fewer pathways to TV than ever before, so as well as killing whatever identity SmackDown had left, the company has completely strangled all kinds of opportunities that existed before, leaving people like Buddy Murphy and Ali, prior to his recent reinvention, just kind of floating around, doing nothing. Given that Bischoff and Heyman will be writing independently, it stands to reason that WWE would do away with the wildcard rule entirely. And they should. It hasn't worked at all, and yeah, it just kind of sucks. Number 5, happier talent on Raw. While Paul Heyman has definitely ruffled a few feathers throughout his lengthy career in wrestling, there's no doubt that his guys speak very highly of him indeed, and therefore we can probably deduce that something good is going to happen with regards to the levels of morale on WWE Raw. On top of this, Heyman is a very sharp creative mind, and on top of that, there are men and women on that Raw roster who will have grown up idolizing his ECW work and maybe even his SmackDown stuff. Now, they get to be part of that. Go ahead and watch any one of WWE's awesome behind the scenes documentaries and you will see Paulie hanging around in the background talking to someone. In a recent 365, for example, he's hanging out with Alexa Bliss, sharing creative ideas, and just generally being a good liaison between management and talent. In other episodes, he shows up doing the same thing all the goddamn time, and going forward, forging such productive working relationships is almost certainly going to be critical. Let's hope Heyman can get everyone pulling in the same direction once again and make stories of discontented stars like The Revival and Sasha Banks well and truly a thing of the past. Number 4. Longer term planning on SmackDown. Now, I can already hear a bunch of you laughing at this point down in the comment section, so let's preface that by saying that the many mistakes that Eric Bischoff made in WCW are definitely a thing. He should be held accountable for them and they are never going away. But it does sound like he's learned his lesson. This is what he says almost every single week on his 83 Weeks podcast. He faces up to his errors, he owns them, he takes full responsibility, and that's very encouraging. On a recent episode, co-host Conrad Thompson asked Eric what he would do if AEW approached him about a high-level management position. And while Bischoff said he'd be absolutely flattered, he wouldn't be interested unless there was some kind of long-term planning strategy. And again, he pointed back to those mistakes made in the 90s. What WWE needs are careful, long-term storylines like Sting and his chase of Hollywood Hogan and the NWO. What WWE doesn't need is latter-day WCW, so let's hope the coin lands on the right side. Number 3. A Hulk Hogan comeback? Hulk Hogan's WrestleMania 35 appearance was just kind of weird. If you watch it on the network, the crowd reaction has been edited in a way that makes it all sound positive, like he got this massive ovation and that it was entirely nothing but cheers. But I was in the arena that night and that certainly wasn't the case. There were definitely people cheering him, but there were plenty of people booing him as well. And to be honest, most of the fans just didn't really know how to react. It was odd. Nonetheless, it's no secret that Bischoff and Hogan are big friends outside and inside professional wrestling, and it therefore stands to reason that Hogan could well be involved in some on-air capacity on SmackDown. On top of all of this, Bischoff is also a producer on the upcoming Hogan biopic, and you know who stars in that? Big sexy Chris Hemsworth. WWE love a celebrity tie-in. If they can get Big Sexy Thor on TV and tie it in with Hogan somehow, they'll see that as a winner. Number 2. Brock Lesnar becoming Universal Champion again. PW Insider reckon that as well as working his new office role, Paul Heyman will continue in his on-air role as Brock Lesnar's advocate. That's a lot of work, but if we weigh it up, Brock is a part-timer, and that means that the strain put on Heyman wouldn't be so high as if he was working with a full-timer. That being said, it would get kind of busy around WrestleMania season when you kind of need Lesnar around all the goddamn time. Perhaps that'll be a strain, but I guess we'll find out. But one thing is for sure about this whole thing: the big purple boy is definitely staying in the Universal title hunt. Wrestling history dictates that those in power will always look out for their buddies. Now, as well as having their on-air relationship, Brock and Paul are incredibly close behind the scenes, and that means the Lesnar's going nowhere. Now, the debate as to whether or not this is actually a good thing is entirely up to you guys. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments section below. But either way, I would be absolutely astonished if Lesnar was anything other than a big deal on Heyman's Raw. And at number 1, better handling of NXT call-ups. PW Insider have also compared the work that Heyman and Bischoff will do on Raw and SmackDown to what Triple H does down in NXT. But they are still answering to Vince McMahon. Now that does temper the excitement, but only a little bit. Now, one of the best things about these appointments is that both men have gone on record in the past to say that they are huge fans of NXT. They sound like they definitely appreciate the need to build stars up from a ground level, and only unleash them on main roster TV when the wrestlers themselves are ready and WWE are ready to push them in a way that actually makes them look good. Push. Unfortunately, as we know, recent main roster call-ups just haven't had those luxuries. A lot of them have failed because they were called up too soon, Lacey Evans, while others have just been booked like garbage, EC3. The Heyman thing is particularly encouraging because he has a long history of taking young stars, harnessing their abilities and accentuating everything that's good about their performance. He's been doing it forever. It'll be really good to see what he can do with someone like Shayna Baszler, a total badass down in NXT, who, let's be honest, Vince McMahon probably isn't going to get on the main roster. It'd be great to see her prosper, and it would be great to see the Viking experiences and the No Way Jose's and the AOPs and everyone else become a thing of the past. Anyway, you wee willy winkies, that's my take on the situation, and as always, I'm interested in knowing what you guys have to say. So head on down to the comment section below, let us know what kind of changes you think Heyman and Bischoff will bring to WWE TV for better or for worse. And once you've done that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Don't know why I did that. That's not even remotely close to a ringing sound. Anyway, once you've done that, follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray. Tatty bye.